Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. I'm Brian Fitzy and this is Building Blocks. Today's lesson, I thought I would talk a little bit about live looping, just the basics of it here. Trying to approach it as a new technology, as a tool. I try not to use it as anything other than a tool that enables me to do just a bit more than I can by myself. I like it to be an extension of what I'm doing and not replace what I'm doing. I should be able to do the things that I want to do by myself without this technology. I like to use it as a thing to basically be more of myself than I can by myself, if that makes sense. So the way live looping works, if you're not familiar with it, is you have any kind of signal source. So that could be your voice, or an acoustic instrument that you're just going to pick up with a microphone, or it could be a guitar, or a bass, or a saxophone, or a trumpet, or an electric violin, a keyboard, whatever. I use all of those instruments, and I run into a really complex setup. Today I'm going to run a very much more simple setup here. This is the Boss RC30. It's able to do two different phrases, so you can have two recordings of things layered. The way live looping works is, on all of these devices, you have a button that you press that starts the recording process. So whatever is going into it is going to be recorded, and it's going to be printed. It's going to be permanently the way that it goes in. And then you're able to record things on top of that. This looper is pretty great functionality-wise for being a simple looper. You've got this button here is going to do both record and overdub, and it also functions as a play button when it's not playing anything. Basically have another button here that's just stop. So the way this works, I'll give you a little demo here. I'll press this button. I would usually use my feet to control this, but I want you to be able to see the looper and what I'm doing. So I'm just going to press this button, and I'm going to count to 4. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to press the button on the 1. I'm actually, when I get to 4, I'm going to go back to 1, just like I was counting quarter notes. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I'm going to press this button on the 1 both times. All right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can hear that that's just going over and over and over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I press that button to stop it, it's going to immediately stop playback. So play. 1, 2, 3. Stop. Play. 1, 2. And I could really quickly. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. All right. So I have the ability to have that go. So what I can do is I can record stuff on top of that. So while it's playing, I'll do something else. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now those two things that I recorded in, those two layers, they're now playing back. Consider them to be blended together, like ingredients if you were making a cake or something, you know? So those ingredients are now part of a greater whole. Some loopers, like this one, do have the ability that you can undo the most recent thing that you recorded, but if you left it in record mode and recorded like 50 different layers, which would be a lot, if they all happen in the same pass of recording, if you try to undo any of it, you will undo all of it. So there are times when I'm looping that I'll think from a construction standpoint, I might want to get rid of this layer that I'm going to put on top at some point later to free up space, and I have to make sure that I quickly stop the overdubbing process and then restart it. That way, I've got that safety net of not deleting all the other stuff. I'll give you an example of that. I'm going to clear this out. So I'll put down a bass layer. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's going. 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into overdub mode. So while it's playing back, I'll be able to record on top of it. And I am going to just put a bunch of layers. So it's going to just keep coming back to the beginning, and laying. So let's do this.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
We've got a lot of layers there now, right? Now, if I wanted to undo one of them, unfortunately, I put all of my second layer is tons of different passes. So if I undo that, you have to do it while it's playing back with this looper.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm right back to square one with my first layer of loops. So, aside from just being able to record one thing and stack a bunch of stuff on top of it, which doesn't mean anything if you don't have bookends on that, right? So if I'm building a loop, I want to think about things from the standpoint of laying down something that I was already doing and have that have a supplemental role in the construction of a bigger composition. I want it to continue so I can do something else that's complementary to it, or contrasting it. I don't want to build a bunch of stuff and just keep stacking because where do I have to go from there? I can only continue to go up with the size of the arrangement, the size of the loop, or I can go to one voice all of a sudden out of nowhere. So I always try to think, like, if I'm going to build something really tall, it needs to build to a point where going to nothing is a statement. So that's maybe a little bit too complex for today's lesson, but I want to talk a little bit about the construction process. So when I'm building a loop, first I want to think about how long do I want this to be? And that's always going to be contextual based on the song, right? The way this is set up right now is I just have my microphone. This is a SM58 with a switch on it, which is dope if you're doing looping. Every time I have a loop mic hooked up to my setup, I always want to have a switch on it to kill it. That way, when I don't want the mic to be looping audio in, it won't. If I had other instruments hooked up to this, and this has a variety of different I/O on it, you've got 2 channels of 1/4-inch input and 2 channels of 1/4-inch output and a mic input, and there's also an aux input. So you could hook up at least 3 devices to this. If you hooked up a mixer's output into this, you would be able to have as many channels of input into this as the mixer has, plus 2. So, which is how I use my looper when I'm performing live with it. I have a much more complex setup than this that I'll probably get into in future videos. But this allows you to plug in, say, a mic for beatboxing or vocal looping, and then a guitar or a bass, whatever. And then you can run this out into anything. I like to typically, with my setup, run this out into direct into a mixer, and that goes to the PA, whether I'm in a venue or if I'm in the studio. It goes into my interface, my audio interface, and I record it there. You could plug it into an amp as well. If you were just doing guitar looping or bass looping or whatever, just put this in line with your other pedals, and you can start stacking stuff up. Where this sits in the signal chain makes a difference too. You would never want this before all of your effects. You want this after all of the effects. Because otherwise, you would lay down a loop. Say you had a distortion pedal in front of this, and you recorded some stuff, and you're like, cool, I got these clean guitar lines recorded in now. I'm going to play a distorted guitar solo on top of it. You kick your distortion pedal on. If it's after this, all of a sudden your loops are all going to be distorted too. So, whereas if this was sitting in front of the distortion pedal, when you go to kick that distortion pedal on, all the clean loops that got put into this are going to stay clean, okay? So where this sits in the signal chain makes a big difference. But to get back to construction and arrangement, I usually try to think from the standpoint of how long is it going to be, that number of bars, and what purpose does the loop serve. So, for example, I might want to have say I have a chord progression that's got four chord changes, and every single bar has a different chord change. So maybe it goes 1 4 5 1. I'm gonna probably want to lay down 4 bars of loop here so I can lay down those chord changes on top of it. If the purpose is just to add some drum backing as an accompaniment and basically make this thing just like having a live percussionist or just a beatboxer or whatever in the room with you performing, then you don't need to do 4 bars of that. If you're not going to lay anything else on top of this, then just 1 bar. Now what I did was, right there, was just a touch late on pressing this button the second time. If you are not perfectly on time here, your loop's going to be off all the time. So, for example, if I did, I'm going to try to, it takes a lot of effort, but I'm going to try to stop it early, the recording process, and I'll show you how disjointed that gets. All right, so that's totally not square at all. That totally doesn't work at all there. When you have that kind of mistake happen, if you record it in incorrectly, it's just going to keep repeating incorrectly. So always trying to get that timing down is everything. Some loopers are going to give you the ability to do quantizing and stuff like that. I prefer to get it right on the way in. None of the hardware that I use offers me any of those features, and that's kind of by design. I didn't want to have those features be available. It just doesn't, it wouldn't be, I try not to use looping as a thing that is the centerpiece. I like to have it as a thing that allows me to do my performance, just like I said in the beginning. So the idea of not getting it right in front of the crowd and then all of a sudden it comes out right seems kind of like cheating. So try to get it right on the way in. There are tons of apps if you do not have access to getting a loop pedal. There are tons of different pieces of software out there that are free, and they're going to show you the exact same challenges, the rigid hardware confines of live looping. Some of that software is going to be a lot more wide open than a piece of hardware like this. If you do want to get a piece of hardware like this, I suggest buying it used. I've got all sorts of different loopers. This is the RC30. I also have an RC20XL. I have 2 of those, I believe. I have 2 RC300 loop stations. Those are in 2 different rigs. That's my main setup. And I also have an RC50, which is the predecessor to the RC300. These are all products by Boss Roland. I don't have any endorsement with Boss Roland, but I think that their hardware is just awesome. A lot of live vocal loopers that are exclusively doing beatbox and acapella stuff are using the Boss RC505, which is also a dope looper, totally meant to be used with your hands. All of these other loopers are meant to be used with your feet. And they all have different functionality. Obviously, the more that you spend, the more features you're going to get. But check out the used market. You should be able to find an awesome looper for under $150. The big heavy hitter loopers are going to be quite a bit more, but should be anywhere between $250 and what they street for, which is $500, $550. So, yeah. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything, leave them in the comments. And also, leave in the comments what you think, what you'd like me to cover next in the next lesson. It's kind of difficult for me to figure out what stuff I want to focus in on if I don't know what you want me to focus in on. There's a lot of stuff up here, and I'd like to get it into there for you. Hope I'll see you next week, Wednesday at noon. Be well.